All right, and we are back with Online with an Architect. My name's Josh Hodges. I'll be your host today, and very excited to have a special guest who was actually one of my VCDX panelists, so someone I hold very dear to my heart, Andrew Hald. Welcome, Andrew.
Josh, it's great to be with you today. Thanks for taking the time, and it should be a fun discussion.
Yeah, absolutely. I appreciate you coming on. So, for a bit of background, do you want to give us a bit of an intro for the three people on planet Earth in the industry who don't know who you are? Let's give a bit of background.
Oh, you're being too kind. There are plenty of folks who don't know who I am, but for those of you who don't, my name's Andrew Hald. I was at VMware for many years, almost 16 years, as a principal architect. And before that, worked at the University of California, worked at this little company called Move that actually operated a big website called Realtor.com. So a little bit of different marketplace experience, different industries, and then took that experience to VMware as a professional services consultant. And kind of started right at the bottom, so I made that transition from customer. And at the time at Realtor.com, we had one of the largest production VI3 deployments. Back then it was a big deal, but we laugh now, VI3, right? 100 blade IBM blade deployment of VI3 back in the day to run Realtor.com. And took the opportunity once we broke everything and kind of made a name for myself inside of VMware as that annoying customer who keeps challenging configuration maximums, and became part of the company at an amazing time. There were less than 1,000 people inside VMware at that time. And it was innovative, it was collaborative, and it was an incredible opportunity to be part of the revolution that we've seen that has turned into first virtualization and then cloud computing over the last 20 years. So, yeah, and then after VMware, went to this other little company called AWS, worked in their training and certification department for the last year and a half, and now excited to be joining a company called Tech Accelerator, doing work near and dear to my heart that I'm sure we'll talk through as we go along. But
yeah, we
the things
will.
that I'm passionate about, good architecture, listening to customers, understanding requirements, and making sure that the technical implementation delivers value to the business. And then making great teams where humans, the people, have an opportunity to advance, to excel, to learn, to try new things, where they enjoy coming into work every day and are challenged. Those are the things I'm most passionate about.
Oh, I couldn't agree more. I think, bringing the team up and making sure everyone's successful is a great thing to do, and I find it very enjoyable as well. And what I'm trying to do in my current role also. So great to hear some alignment there. Given that you are a VCDX, you're number 4 actually in the world, which is
I didn't mention that, did I?
That's why I thought I'd get that in there. You're being too humble. So 4th VCDX in the world. So that must mean you were part of the first group, the pilot program to go through. I'd love to hear all the war stories about that.
Well, John Rashid likes to call that group those without belly buttons, because we were made, not born, and it was a first group of, I think there were 6 of us. All right. And Duncan Epping didn't like being number 6, so we skipped VCDX number 6. I don't know if you know this. That's why Duncan is VCDX 007.
I had heard that story.
Because he had to be 007. But I think we were all thrilled to do that. And this group, let me tell you, it was back 2007, right after I joined the company, right? And 2008, I think, is when we actually finished putting things together. And it was really a conversation about what does it look like to not just be someone who comes in and installs and configures software, right? That was the big professional service offering at that time, install and configure, just come in and set up the software, and customers were paying for that. And that's important function. But what's far more important then is to ask the question of what's next. What can this do for us? What is the value add of vSphere? And how does it elevate the business to the next thing the business needs to do? And the funny thing is, it was around these times that, like lean principles were starting, they were looking at lean manufacturing and going, hey, this could apply to IT. And the very beginnings of the DevOps movement, right? These conversations were starting to happen. IBM was publishing red books on what is cloud and cloud computing. And all of this converged to create an environment where we understood that you needed a senior architect level certification, not just somebody who could install the product, but then who could help customers answer the question of what's next. Why do I care? What's the value? How do I make sure that not only is this paying me back on my investment, but 4, 5, 6, 10x over, I'm gaining efficiencies in my operations, security, businesses, all across IT, and then next step to actually delivering business value back to the business.
Yeah, absolutely. And John even spoke to that as well on podcast number 1. Of course, I had to have VCDX number 1 as podcast number 1. And so I should have had Duncan on number 7. Yeah, I think it's been a very consistent message from John and yourself on what the value and the goal of that VCDX program was. So continue. Tell us more.
Yeah, I mean, that was an incredible room to be in, right? What's that?
We
didn't really have the typical candidate experience, right? Because we're looking around the room going, is there anybody in this room who shouldn't pass, right? The idea was they put us in the room and said, figure out what certification would certify you guys, So, I mean, I suppose it would have been possible that we wouldn't pass. We all went through everything you had to go through as a candidate. So we had to prepare our own designs. We had to pass the VCAP, exams. We helped create and write all those questions. So I'm sorry. I apologize for putting you through the pain and suffering and mental anguish. But I mean, there's a reason it's hard, right? It is among the list of things I've done. Going back to business school later in life and completing my VCDX. Those are 2 of the hardest things I've ever done. And they're also 2 of the most worthwhile things I've ever done. I remember because, all of us were from different geographic locations. We all came into Palo Alto for that week of doing the defenses, and every design was unique. Every design, and that's the hard thing about creating how do you score this? Because you don't want to score personality. How likable someone is should not factor into this certification, even though a good architect needs to be amiable, needs to get along with their customer, right? So presentation skill, right, and ability to connect with the customer, those are things you can evaluate, right?
Absolutely.
So I think our focus was on creating something that didn't exist anywhere else. It wasn't just a senior technical certification. It measured soft skills. It measured your ability to stand up in front of a room of your peers and to defend your design, almost like a PhD defense, right? The difference is this is more like an MD degree, right? It's a practitioner of the science as opposed to a theoretical conversation about it. And I think that's why, especially early on, a lot of folks who created fictitious designs that didn't actually map to a real customer, they struggled more because they weren't prepared to answer all the questions that come about why. Why did you choose this? Why, best practice is never a good answer, right? Unless it truly applies to something that is unique and specific to that customer. So, but I have to say, overall, the most valuable takeaway was the relationships with those folks, Mustafa and John, Duncan, incredible, incredible room. And I'll never forget. And many of us have stayed close for years after. And I think that's also something that makes this community unique. The community of folks who work on VMware. It is a relatively small family, and we really gain respect for one another. I mean, there is no storage engineer in the world as powerful as Mustafa Khalil. I mean, he knows things. He knows where everybody at VMware is buried. So,
and he wrote the book, and not only did he write the
quite
book,
literally,
he wrote the book.
Yeah,
it
exactly.
was sick, right? So I remember reading it, and it's fantastic, very in-depth book.
Well, and for me also, that was very early on in my VMware career, right? I joined in 2007, and we completed VCDX, the first round of it, in 2008. So I went very quickly from starry-eyed newbie to getting involved and getting my hands dirty. And that's just the way I'm wired. Is I saw this coming and said, I have to help. I have to get involved in this. And it was a wild adventure. It was great.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it reminds me of when we created the NPX program at Nutanix.
Right, you were telling me about that.
Yeah, it was similar. It's just a room of, I think it was about 16 of us, just really smart people. Some of those people who contributed ultimately didn't even attempt the certification, but their expertise contributing to making sure that it was of a high standard was really good. And yeah, I mean, when you've got people like Michael Webster, you've got John Kohler, you got Lane Leverett, these guys just in a room trying to work out what the scoring criteria should be. And like Magnus Anderson as well. I remember I've been on the panel with all these guys. And as a panelist, one thing I enjoyed was really seeing these guys at their best. You see them with customers doing, pieces and whatever, but very rarely do you see sort of an end-to-end presentation of an entire solution and their troubleshooting and on-the-fly design expertise. And to watch that, not only is it a good learning experience, because everyone learns something. I think as a panelist, I was like, oh, that's interesting. Magnus said this, or Michael said that. But just really good to see world-class expertise. So, yeah, very difficult to mark those guys down on the scoring report. Sure.
You said something there, though, that resonated with me. Go ahead and finish. I didn't mean to interrupt.
Yeah, that was pretty much my point. It was like, these guys were so talented that just to be associated with them and be in the room to create something with them was a privilege for sure.
Right. You said something that really made me reflect, and that's to see these guys at their best, right? And I think that's something that struck me about participating as a panelist as well, right? For something like this, people bring their A game. They prepare, they study, they come ready to have this conversation. And when they don't, it, and they don't pass. It's pretty clear. But there's something that one of my mentors in business school shared, and it's always stuck with me. It's, how do you want people to know you and remember you? Do you want them to remember your worst moment on your worst day, or do you want them to remember your best moment on your best day? And I think too often, somebody has a bad day and they have a really bad moment on that bad day, and it becomes something that others remember, right? And they become known for that. And I think in this industry in particular, we would benefit from celebrating the wins, and for everyone, even more so with these types of certifications. It's a big deal. And somebody's put so much time and effort. It's a great opportunity to say, look at this. This is a pinnacle of your career. This is quite an achievement. And I think I also know for me, in a career that gets long now, 30 years in the industry, it's easy to forget those personally. My best moments on best days, when you get down, you look back on it and go, am I that same guy? Sure I am. In fact, I'm that same guy with another 20 years of experience.
Yeah.
That's a good thing, I think our failures should not define us, but they should propel us to our next success. And, it made me think about that. Our best moment on our best day is how we want people to remember us. And programs like the VCDX or the Nutanix certification, what is it?
NPX, Nutanix.
NPX, right. Those types of senior certifications, they provide that opportunity. Best moment on best day. Sure.
Yeah, like CCIE is another one. Like I always look at CCIE as, I'm still very envious because I started my career off in networking, CCNA, and went through the Cisco Academy program and that to learn that skill set. And I always wanted to be CCIE, and my career sort of took me in the different direction. And obviously, I'm very happy being VCDX, NPX, whatever. But I always look at the CCIEs. I go, wow, that's a cool certification of true expertise in a slightly different area of the market in the engineering side. And I got a lot of respect for the people who can sit that lab and get through it for sure.
It was the original gauntlet, if you will, senior certification, right? And I remember being in that same spot. Back at UC Santa Barbara, I was running old Cisco 4000 routers, old school. Now I'm dating myself, right? With token ring, and why do people respect that? Because it shows dedication, I think, and the ability to finish what you start, right? Follow through. So, yeah, I totally agree. I remember CCIE being on my list of, I got to go do that. Right around the same time I was earning my Microsoft certs.
Yeah, MCSE and all that. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, fun times. And one thing I was going to say, actually, something popped up on Twitter the other day, and someone just passed their CCIE version 4 or something. I'm not super familiar with all the different versions, but CCIE, some version, just passed it and put out a quite, to your point, should be celebrated. That's a fantastic achievement. Right. They also highlighted that they'd sat 7 times before passing.
Woo.
And my initial response, or my still to this day reaction to that, is fantastic. Well done.
Right.
That's great resilience. Like if I fail something 5 times, I'm probably not sitting number 6, right? But that person pushed through, and obviously it's a very, very difficult thing to achieve. So, I think failing is no failure at all. And the fact they persisted, I think, is brilliant. And if anything, that's better than passing on the first go. So that's going to be my excuse.
We had someone who failed the VCDX like 3 times and passed it on their 4th. And I remember the celebration because the transition from the first time to the time they passed, the program itself, the very process of becoming a VCDX had elevated this person as an architect. And they were grateful. The program recognized, wow, the certification actually helped them advance. What a concept.
Yeah,
through mentoring, through personal growth. It's pretty awesome.
It is. And I think that the moment you start that journey, you realize, oh, wow, this is just an amazing learning opportunity. Like, even if at the end of the day, you just sat the panel and no one ever sent you the result, you're better as a result of going through the panel. Like, you'd obviously drive yourself a bit crazy, not knowing if you passed or failed, but really, you've elevated yourself just getting in the room and then doing your presentation, even if it was not your best day, right? You've only performed at 7 out of 10 of your ability. You've still learned something. You've learned, oh, wow, in that pressure situation, I struggled to get in my groove. And then on the next attempt, you can prepare for that. Like, that's something you can practice. So, yeah, I think this is one of those certifications where you can learn from the process. I think it's much more difficult to do that at like a VCP level. Sort of those VCP exams, to be honest, I find them more difficult than the VCAPs. So you laughed about VCAP exams and writing them earlier. They were not easy by any stretch. But what I found was they were difficult in a way that aligned to my job as an architect.
Right.
So I was like, oh, this is a difficult question. I have to really think about it. But this is what I do. I try and solve difficult problems. So whereas
how does
VCP
an architect answer this question?
like remembering stuff. Like I can't remember config maximums and stuff like that. So, I struggle with like version numbers and, remembering command lines and all this sort of stuff. But when it comes to a practical test, like the VCAP, DCD, and obviously the administration one back in the day, I was like, oh, the administration is just me doing my job. Go in, configure some stuff, troubleshoot some stuff. And, again, not easy, but I find those type of tests, the practical type tests, a lot easier than the multiple choice. And I still don't know why multiple choice exams have to be testing your ability to interpret the question and then changing like one word in the answer, and you just have to read it 10 times. And to be honest, you probably don't even need to know what the question was. You can just read the answers 4 times and
let me tell you, for all of our effort as a team putting together those exams, we tried not to do that because we all hate that, right? Yeah. And you still end up with questions because it goes through, a third party who's helping reword things, and it ends up, they're supposed to make it better. Sometimes not so much. You end up with those questions we all remember that go, there's 4 right answers.
Yeah, I hate it when it's choose the best one. It's like, you've given me no context to choose the best one.
Right. What's the customer requirement? How would an architect respond? Tell me what's most important to the customer, and I'll tell you what the right answer is.
Yeah, I sat an exam recently, actually. Obviously, I can't disclose what it was or anything like that. But there was a question where I looked at it and I went, that's a terrible, like, even if that is what they want me to say, which I believe it was, you can't write that. That's not measurable.
Right.
You can't write, oh, it's the fastest or something. Like you've got to have something that's actually measurable.
Right.
And I just remember looking at it going, I bet that's written in the documentation somewhere. And after the exam, I went and looked it up, and I was like, God, that documentation.
And of course, it's right there. They just pulled it straight from the docs. Yeah.
Yeah, and I'm like, damn, I wish that vendor would not have had that in there because it's just like, I mean, technically, you might explain it like that to a customer, but you've got to give someone a measurable answer or criteria to test against. But anyway, that's exams for you. But to my earlier point, I think the VCAPs are a better test of skill, and the VCDX is obviously that, and CCIE type tests are a much better test of practical real world experience.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, and obviously that's the point of the panel defense, right? That's what takes this from PhD to MD, right? You're a practitioner and you can demonstrate it in practical ways. You have a real design with a real customer.
Yeah. So it spans all the way through. Like you and I love to talk conceptual, logical, and physical, but VCDX really does span that, and the defense tests you at all of those levels as well. So I really like that as well.
Remember, the old traceability matrix, right? There's this decision made all the way down at the physical layer about, some vSwitch setting, and why did we configure it with that profile? Well, let's work our way all the way back up through the logical design where we chose the technology as an outcome, right? And then all the way back up to the 5 things that were most important to the CIO. And there's your justification right there.
Yeah.
Conceptual, logical, physical, you're not doing it right when you come out with a list of 600 requirements. You're doing it right at the conceptual level when you have like 10 or less requirements at the conceptual level when you're talking to your stakeholders, right? These are big ideas. They're business value generating ideas, and they can be broken down into functional and non-functional requirements. That's why you take them through a logical design. I think the problem becomes when you end up with, because usually when you have this list of 600 requirements, they're not all really requirements. a ton of them are assumptions and constraints, right?
Yeah.
That need to be invalidated and shifted so that you can get down to what are the essential business goals. Start there, but nobody does. I mean, that was one of the reasons we needed VCDX, right? Because a technology company like VMware, all of our practitioners are technologists. So they start with the technology and go, isn't this cool? Look at all these things that we can do with it. And I think that's what happened is a lot of folks were deploying, private cloud as it became to be known, but virtualization, right, into an existing IT environment that already reflected the business requirements, right? So they're just saying, we'll overlay this and use it instead. And very quickly, they started running into problems because there are design decisions you have to make as you're putting this together so that just like the physical infrastructure, the network infrastructure, the storage, the database, all of that, it has to reflect the business and what their priorities are. So, yeah, I think it's really interesting how things have evolved, and certainly how virtualization and cloud computing have in turn revolutionized how we deliver IT, and more so how IT delivers value to the business. So,
yeah, absolutely,
it's good stuff.
And I think, to your point, not many people go through that process, but for sure, you and I know there's 300 people on the planet who do go through that process when they do design,
right?
Because they know it's like a cheat code to getting a great outcome. If you follow that process, it really does make it almost a guarantee to get a good outcome, even though it may be perceived to take longer. In my experience, if you follow the process well, you avoid so many hiccups along the way that while you might seem to be starting out a project a bit slower, before you're, say, breaking ground on construction or whatever, but once you get there, it flows much quicker. You have far less issues and the outcome can be delivered much more reliably. So, yeah, to me, people get frustrated at the conceptual phase and the logical phase because they don't feel like anything's happening. But the amount of rework that I see at the physical layer, when you haven't gone through that, it's the opposite.
Right.
You've built the building, then you've realized you've screwed it up. You got to destroy the whole building and restart.
Right.
We don't want that. So,
no.
Yeah, I think we're well aligned on that.
Well, what happens often, you're familiar, I'm sure, with like the and-on cord terminology, right? What happens often is folks who are trying to start introducing DevOps principles or good sound cloud architecture principles, these VCDXs, one of the biggest mistakes we can make is to pull the end on cord on delivery of value, right? Because we think it's important to talk about conceptual and logical. Oftentimes, the reasons we're brought in are to deliver a very specific project. So that is actually how I, in the time I was in professional services, that's how I'd up-level the conversation, is I'd make sure I was immediately delivering to my statement of work the reason why I was there, because that was my clearest statement of business value, right? They're paying me to achieve those results. So if I could deliver those quickly, then the rest of the time I had boots on the ground there, that was my opportunity to start up-leveling the conversation, talking about the next job I was going to come in and do. And a lot of customers hadn't even thought about that. The SEs loved working with me because I'd have the next 3 PSO engagements teed up, after I left. And that is the missing piece, I think. You can't pull the end on cord, right? Stop the assembly line and say, we need to get this right. We need to do right architecture. If you're that guy, you're going to get booted right away.
Yeah.
You have to keep delivering value, create the opportunity, demonstrate to them that they need you, and then say what's next, right? And that follow-on sale is where you start going up to the top and having that C-level conversation about the conceptual. Day one, you can't, if you're in a conference room with IT admins, you're not going to sit down and ask them about their business requirements. You're going to whiteboard your immediate solution, physical layer, and deliver it. And the quicker you get that done, that creates the opportunity to go have the business conversations.
I think you've really highlighted the value of a good architect as well. It's not just in designing and delivering outcomes. It's making sure customers know what is that next step. Or
Right.
have you thought about this piece? We're delivering.
Or even asking. They don't ask.
Just ask the question. And I think,
Yeah.
again, you mentioned the sales team used to love working with you. I'm not at all surprised, but in my experience, you get a good architect with a sales team, the scope generally gets bigger, but in the best interest of the customer.
Right.
Not just selling the customer shelfware. It's, here is a solution that's going to make your business better. And this was the piece you wanted us to do, which we're going to do. But have you realized that if we put this piece on or another piece over here, you'll get exponentially more value out of it. And yeah, you can help speed up sales cycles. You can make sure the outcome is much more what a customer might expect, and even more so.
So I was called in to do what was called a jump start at a large healthcare provider in Southern California. And that's a week-long basic training, in the old days of VMware, just get them up to speed on vSphere, train their admin team. You're in, you're out, and you're moving on. And we started having these conversations. What are your challenges? What are your pain points? And after day one, I got into the room with the CIO at the company, because some of the questions I had asked the admins got escalated to their manager, who got escalated to the VP, who said, why don't we just go talk to this guy? And it turned out they had a massive $10 million data center migration underway, right? They have very expensive real estate in Los Angeles, and they were using hospital space for their data center.
Oh my God.
Right? That they really needed to recover for patient care, right? So in this aspect, when you're helping with IT, you're actually help improve quality of service to patients. So it's a very rewarding thought when you go through all this. And you made me think about this, because you're talking about it might be more expensive, right? They're going to have to, if they're having me come back, they're paying for new services with me. We turned that $10 million data center migration that was supposed to take 2.5 years into a 6-month, $5 million data center migration. And VMware, my employer at the time, got a significant larger portion of the pie than their little jumpstart, right? Because I came back as a resident and continued to provide services through that 6-month data center migration, right? So they paid more for me, but we cut their overall costs in half. And that's what a good architect is able to do, right? Because they're able to identify the inefficiencies in the system and to say, look, you're really going to put servers on the back of a truck and drive it 10 miles down the road to your new data center location? Why would you do that? Just buy your new gear, put it over there, and we did P2Vs. We physically to virtually migrated everything, killed two birds with one stone, turned off all their old physical servers, virtualized everything except the databases at the time. We worked with the database team and let them keep their own space. Ultimately, the databases came a year and a half later. Everything was virtualized by the end. So
I remember the lift and shift projects well. Like I had customers who did those, and certainly I wish at the time I'd gone through VCDX and I could have given them better guidance. Obviously, it was early in my career. I hadn't had the skills and experience to really help them as much as I would have loved to looking back. But I remember, like, you lift and shift hardware, you put it in a truck, like you say, you set it back up, 10%.
And then how many hard drives have failed by the time you get to the new location?
Yeah, it's like 10% of the servers don't turn on. It's like, oh my God. All right. And in those days, physical, how do you recover it? It's like tapes. Right. It's just horrible. So to your point, they might have spent more money buying new hardware and spending for your time, but the window went from $10 million to $5 million because they got it done quicker, and they got it done without risk and downtime and impact to the hospital, which obviously that's life-saving stuff. So
and now there are patients getting their MRI scans where the data center used to be. So it just makes you feel good. You've been part of a solution.
Yeah. That'd be a great case study, actually. I'm sure there was one done on it, but that's a really good outcome. Yeah, customers getting cared for instead of servers, spinning away, creating dust. Yeah,
definitely.
Yeah, fantastic. All right. So at VMware, I know from knowing you that you did a lot of work with the hands-on labs, and this is
Yeah,
something that I
that's
think
the next
is fantastic.
major phase of my career for sure.
Yeah. So I won't steal your thunder. Talk us through what are hands-on labs for people who don't know, because I think they need to know, and also, yeah, tell us about the experience building those and what they've done.
Well, I mean, they were from very early on in my time another one of these volunteer things, like VCDX. I just got my hands dirty with everything. And the thing that attracted me to hands-on labs is it was using VMware technology to demonstrate VMware technology, a dog fooding type thing.
Mm.
And it was the result of a couple of SEs sitting down going, this should be possible, right? On the back of a napkin, can you run ESX inside of ESX so that you can run a full copy of a virtual data center and provision it and destroy it and provision it and destroy it rapidly? So really, you're leveraging that first physical layer of vSphere to operationalize and bring automation and efficiency to the provisioning and destroying of virtual environments, right? We know it's very good at doing that. So can you do that with actual full installs of vCenter and ESX? And, in the original iteration of the hands-on labs, it was running, if you can believe it, on PC laptops running VMware Workstation. It wasn't even a virtual data center, and we'd run around the room with a hard drive, re-imaging the laptop to reset it. So, you needed the human army just to keep the things up. I don't know if people remember that far back, like 2007, 2008, I think may have been the first year that we brought the giant data center. And they were doing that for the instructor-led labs, right, where they created a private cloud and delivered labs there instead of on a laptop. But in 2008, they still had the Fusion lab on a whole bunch of Macs, right, because they hadn't figured out how to run Fusion in the cloud. And it all really accelerated in the years that followed. So again, I was a volunteer. I was what was called a lab captain. I developed content early on. I worked on the networking lab. There was just a networking general lab, talked about vSwitches and basic stuff. There was no NSX, none of that. And then I caught the bug of content management, and I transitioned to helping the core team, who basically managed and ran the whole labs, put together the content catalog. I was still a volunteer, still working in professional services, but my role changed on the virtual team of hands-on labs. And through a series of different transitions and changes, I went from field PSO to practice development, which built the service kits for professional services, to in 2012, the opportunity popped up to take this hobby of the hands-on labs and turn it into my full-time job. Pablo Roche, the director of the hands-on labs, was hiring a new team to take it from Mornay Vanderwalt put together a really incredible solution, and that was the original lab cloud, as it was known, that did a phenomenal job deploying the infrastructure. We had moments, boy, and that team's job beyond hands-on labs was to run at the bleeding edge. If their hair isn't on fire, they're not doing it right? But at some point, if we're going to make the hands-on labs a reliable business product, it can't just push the boundaries. It needs to become a standardized, reliable, developed and delivered service, right? So that's what Pablo was hired to do, and the new team inherited all the great work that Mornay and team had done. And Curtis Pope and Mike DiPetrillo, who had worked on that previous team, took over the code base that they had and created the VMware Learning Platform to deliver hands-on labs. So partnering with that new VLP team, Pablo and myself and Joey Deakins and a couple of others set out to say, what is the HOL today and what do we as a company really need it to be, right? And in those old days, it was deliver 10, 15,000 labs in a week for attendees at trade shows, right? So VMworld US, VMworld Europe, and back then it was called Partner Exchange in the US, right? Those 3 annual events. So, wow, 45,000 labs in a year, that's exciting, and it was.
Totally, yeah.
It was a big deal. And it was a lot of work that went into delivering those trade shows. And the big revolution and revelation that Pablo and I had as we talked to customers, visited VMUGs, assessed the market. This needs to transition from being just at trade shows to something that is always on, always delivering value. And where we really saw the gap, it's Moore's crossing the chasm, in the product adoption lifecycle. From the early adopters to an established product, there's this gap that most products really struggle to get over. How do you navigate that? And we found putting their hands on the product for free, don't charge them for it, but let them get their hands dirty and the product sells itself. Because it's obvious then what the value is. Customers have light bulb moments and go, oh, I see how I could do this. And we found that labs created those over and over and over and over again for customers. So let's make this a marketing engine, right? That was the idea. We're going to partner with the business units. We're going to turn this into their part of their go-to-market strategy. And over 10 years, it became an incredibly successful, one of VMware's most successful marketing engines, generating over $2 billion a year in market source pipeline. And partnering with inside sales and the teams to highlight the value of each product in a very rapid way. Every product page on VMware.com got a try it now button that launched a hands-on lab. And, in 10 seconds or less, a customer would have a fully operational virtual data center with that product installed to try out. And that's gold. Because what's the biggest problem about selling cloud? It's complicated, right? It requires configuration. It requires, all of this to demonstrate any value, like some of the old operations stuff, right? If you don't have a week's worth of history data to analyze, what does this product do, right? ARIA now, what does it do? Well, we as a hands-on lab team would populate all that data in advance so that when it comes up, there's a story, click-by-click guidance. Click here, you can see the value instantly. We have lightning labs, 15 minutes or less. It's as easy as 1, 2, 3. That was our byline, right? 3 key takeaways in this lab that you can give them, and it only takes 15 minutes. And then the call to action at the end of the lightning lab is to take a deeper dive. But you've got to get your messaging across quickly and demonstrate value. But again, we called it organic marketing, right? Because this isn't a push. It's the best kind of marketing because customers don't want to have products pushed at them. So it's magnetic. It lets customers pick and choose and then identify where they have a need, and then the product comes to them. And it creates sales opportunities in that way. It was the most rewarding part of period of my career, just because how much I grew professionally, how much the program evolved, and just 10 years of anything. It's like raising a child.
Yeah, absolutely.
It was special.
Yeah, I think there's probably a lot of learnings in there. I imagine that as you're trying to create and design these labs, you're trying to think in the VCDX kind of way. You're trying to think, what am I trying to show here? right? What is this lab giving the person? And like the 3-2-1, the takeaway, as you mentioned, is a perfect example. Like if you're doing an SRM lab, I remember doing one many years ago, and it'd be the first time I'd used SRM. This is a long time ago. And I remember doing one of the labs. I went, oh, actually, that's right. I've got to consider this for the design. So actually going through the lab helped me as an architect understand the product better. And then obviously I was going to get it peer reviewed anyway. But so those hands-on labs can be great to market, as you say. Here's what the product can do. Here's what it looks like, touch and feel. It can be great for a partner to do a demo to, again, help that sales process. And it can be great for an architect, whether they're a VMware PSO, a partner architect, or a customer architect, to actually look at a product and consider what it can do before they actually go through an implementation. And certainly faster than doing a POC. POC obviously takes time and money to set up. The hands-on is a massive fast track to that. So I think there's so many use cases to hands-on labs, and ultimately showing customers the product free of charge quickly and easily. And like the 15-minute one you mentioned, it's fantastic. So yeah, lots of credit to that team you mentioned earlier.
What's the biggest challenge with marketing, Josh? What's the biggest problem, especially that we as architects have with marketing?
Oh, that it's nonsense, that it's marketecture.
It's inauthentic.
Yeah, right? It's fake.
We're always second guessing their motivations. I think that's what attracted me to the hands-on labs, because it was technical marketing that was authentic. It actually was based on real value, and we're giving something to the customer that actually matters, right? So that was the unique intersection I saw. Why did we achieve that with the hands-on labs? Because it's this dance that most companies struggle to create. The business has a message, right, that they want to broadcast. And quite often that message is inconsistent with what customers actually need, how they use it, right? The business has this idea of what they think the world is, and it's not always right. Who can hold them accountable? The field. And that was the magic, and still is the magic, of the hands-on labs, right? Because it was actually authored by field SEs, technical account managers, PSO engineers, architects, who are with customers every day, and they know the actual customer pain points. That's where the relevancy came from, because it was written by people who actually knew customers and how they use the products and what they needed. But I've never seen anywhere else in our industry that navigates that. And that's really a credit to Dave Rollins and his team. I know he's no longer with the hands-on labs, but Dave worked for me and ran the content architecture team. And he had a team of incredible content architects that would basically work with the SEs to define the actual content that went into the catalog. And Dave worked magic, right? Every year the content was spot on, and it threaded that needle that is impossible, that conversation, so that the customer, because the customer can smell inauthentic marketing material. That's why they call it market speak, right?
Yeah. Well, I don't know who coined the phrase marketecture, but I thought that's a really good term, because you have all these features and claims that are made at trade shows or on Twitter or something, and sometimes they have some truth to them, but the devil is always in the details. So Hands-on Labs shows you everything. Here's how to configure it. Here's what it does. There's how it operates. Here's all your different options you can choose, and fantastic.
That's why I think customers love it. That's actually why I made the career decision I've made. That's how I've ended up where I am now, because they do this use case. Tech Accelerator does hands-on labs for every customer, not just VMware customers.
Ah, fantastic. Well, tell us a bit more then. You've perfectly segued into that, so let's go down the rabbit hole.
So an old friend of mine, David Hakimian, who used to work for a VAR, a VMware value-added reseller, came to me about the time I was starting my time full-time in the hands-on labs, around 2012. And I was making my transition into helping Pablo build the hands-on labs, and he had the idea, I can make a business out of this. So he went and did it. And he's got a great customer list. He's doing phenomenal work Um, I think, most folks are familiar with, the immediate value of the front end portal, right, of the hands-on labs, that you can very quickly have a lab up and running. All the complex pre-configuration is out of the way. There are two key differentiators to David's platform that I think he's perfected in the last 10 years. And one of those is from a user experience standpoint. He's got full integration and automation for back-end passwords. Click on the story on the right-hand side, and it does automated actions in the vPod, in the live environment. He's very well integrated with both private and public cloud solutions, so he can run against, your major hyperscalers. So there's value added there that isn't in the VMware Learning Platform. We did great work, and the VMware Learning Platform is still doing great work. But I will tell you, a key differentiator is one in that user experience side, and then anybody who's ever had to build one of these things. So we took all the complexity away from the customer, but we heaped it onto the lab authors. And that's one of the most challenging parts about running the hands-on labs always was creating these things, right? And Joey Deakins and his team, Doug Bear and all of those folks, did a phenomenal job keeping the lights on and keeping things moving inside of vCloud Director. Now, I don't want to say anything bad about vCloud Director, but as a center of orchestration for this use case, for the hands-on labs, I'll say it nicely, it's outlived its usefulness. There are much better ways to do this. And certainly from the build side, Tech Accelerator has done that. We're using Terraform and Ansible, and it's fully done as infrastructure as code. So every single lab can be rebuilt from the ground up with zero human interaction. That's a huge achievement. It's a great use case in actually using Terraform, to build entire environments, right? Because these, as we said, these labs are an entire virtual data center. So those were the things that attracted me to the company. He's delivering a use case I'm familiar with, but he's delivering it in a I think more efficient and powerful way than any way I've done it in the past. So I'm thrilled to be partnering with the team and bringing my skill set, as you said, as a VCDX, but just also as another aficionado of DevOps, infrastructure as code, as architecting things the right way and delivering value to the customer. So it's an exciting place to be right now.
Yeah, it sounds like a great project, and obviously, continuing on the work you've done for many years, and doing that in a new space with some new tools is fantastic. That's like that continuous learning we always talk about as VCDXs as well.
Yeah.
It's always challenging ourselves to try new things and use new technologies and approach things with a different way. So that sounds very exciting. I'm looking forward to hearing more about it.
Yeah, and it's kind of funny. We kind of skipped over the year and a half between those things. I worked inside of VMware for a great program called the Center for Advanced Learning. And then so it's more than a year and a half. It's like 2.5 years. I worked with Tom McKay at the Center for Advanced Learning for a year. And then I went to AWS for a year and a half. And really, what are those detours about? They were about finding the place where I could have most impact, right? Where I felt like I was contributing in meaningful ways for the next generation of architects coming up, right? The Center for Advanced Learning was incredible. And I made some lifelong friends as part of that program. If folks haven't heard about it, Dave Crane is now running that for Tom. And he's one of the most talented architects I've ever met. Watch that guy. Now, he doesn't call it Miro. You have to learn, if David is saying it, it's Miro. It's a Miro board. So in his UK accent, right? But watching him in front of, while I was there, it was only virtual instruction, right? Because it was still during the pandemic. But his mastery of that product and in how to use it to demonstrate complex technological ideas and training. The idea of the Center for Advanced Learning is to take VMware's next generation of up and coming senior architects, right? And upskill them in outcome focused consulting, right? How do we drive customer business outcomes? And how do we do it in a way where the customer doesn't feel run over? So soft skills, public speaking skills, being a better listener. A lot of us come from a technology background where our best friend is a computer, not a human. So it's good to learn to speak to humans. Definitely.
Humans are important. They're a critical part of the process.
Right. So I was only there for a year, but it was incredibly rewarding to see those cohorts come through and to graduate these new architects. We weren't just teaching PSO folks. These were SEs, these were TAMs, cloud architects, cloud business managers. And to see those moments where somebody understands, here's the thing. A lot of times people don't know. You're talking about your worst moment on your worst day. A lot of folks aren't self-aware enough to be able to tell you why that happened, why that worst moment on their worst day happened. And that also means they don't know how to keep it from happening again, right?
True.
And I can say through this program, I think the most rewarding thing of Cal was to see every person who came through become more self-aware. We had badass senior architects who could run a whiteboard like nobody's business, but they talked 90% of the time and filled every dead space. They never paused, never listened, and missed opportunities to hear what was important to the customer, right? We had other folks who you never heard from. So you'd go 3 hours, and is that person even still on the call? The great thing about that program and about Cal, so if you see someone who has the Credley badge from the Center for Advanced Learning, you know that this is someone who has been taught and who has really learned the value of becoming more self-aware and becoming more others aware, both, and the right balance of each,
Yeah. And I'm pretty sure I haven't personally done that course. I would love to, actually. So let's get me an invite there. But just putting that out there. But I think that's probably an example of an experience where even if you did that course multiple times, you would take something new away each time and you'd continue to grow. So I love that kind of stuff where
it is open to partners. So if you're a VMware partner, absolutely do inquire with your partner business manager. That's the way to get in. They can nominate you. It's by invitation only. So you have to be nominated by someone inside of VMware to participate in the program. Perfect. I can't nominate you anymore, Josh. I'm not there.
No, that's all right. I got lots of friends at VMware. That's fine. I'm getting on that course.
Yeah, the Center for Advanced Learning, it's got 2 courses. First is Advanced Architecture. So that teaches, in fact, I joked, it should have been the VCDX prep course because all of the soft skills, listening better, all of those things really apply to the defense. Because some of the worst defenses I saw were people who got frustrated with questions folks got from the panel, and they were horrible at interacting. I'm like, is this how a typical customer interaction goes for you? I hope not. And frankly, the process at the end of that advanced architecture course is a very much VCDX-like panel defense with a hypothetical customer. And it's a great exercise.
Sounds like fantastic fun. I'm keen. I wish I could have done 10 defenses, to be honest. I really enjoyed mine. And even though one of my panelists wasn't very good.
I know. That Andrew guy.
Yeah. Didn't ask any nice questions. Always stumped me with stuff. But
Never smiled.
yeah, never
You couldn't
smiled.
tell. It's not like he wears his emotions on his sleeve.
Yeah.
What's going on in his head?
Yeah. But no, I reckon that I would really like to do that course. Actually, I think anything I can do that challenges me, that gives me a new perspective on something, I really enjoy it. And I think once you get to VCDX, one of the downsides is it's very difficult to find new things that you can test yourself against. But this sounds like something that would be very complementary to any senior architect. Like you say, if someone can do a great whiteboard, but they can't speak to a customer, then if it's a monologue, it's not a good place to be. So, yeah, I'd be quite keen to sit that and see how it goes.
I had a couple of VCDXs come through Cal, and I always think that is incredibly important, right? Because a VCDX could teach the advanced architecture course. And, that was one of the reasons why we had a couple of them going through it, was because we wanted them to be an instructor. So we wanted them to observe one so that they could see what it's like as a student. And it was actually incredibly challenging for them to keep their mouths shut and to let others in the classroom learn, because they knew all the answers, or at least they thought they did. And I think one of the best things we can learn as a senior architect is to create opportunities for others in the room, right? Know when to speak and when not to.
Yeah, and look, at Nutanix, we created a boot camp, which sounds similar, I would hope, to the advanced learning. We called it the Enterprise Architecture Boot Camp. And the idea there was, we would give scenarios. In fact, similar to the live fire, I'm doing a live fire course actually at the moment. And live fire is fantastic for anyone who hasn't heard of it.
Same program.
Yeah.
It's Global Strategic Programs at VMware, runs both Livefire and the Center for Advanced Learning.
Yeah, and Livefire is really good. It's a very advanced level course. I think it's great for people of any level. I think you have to have some reasonable skills as a prerequisite, but certainly, VCDXs don't know everything. So I'm going to do as many of the Livefires as I can, make sure I as much as I can. And, I don't mind getting up and in the presentation and saying I don't know something. No one's perfect. But, at Nutanix, we tried to create a similar program where it was, here's a scenario. Let's get you to design and present something. Let's sort of give you a little bit of a mini panel. And then over a couple of days, we actually grow people from, an SE who might know the products reasonably well, but can't really talk at the architecture level to someone who's actually, almost a sort of a junior or architect level person in just a couple of days. It's amazing the transformation you can make by showing people an approach. And one thing I like to do was I would give the sizing exercise to the group. They would have an hour to do it. They'd get up there, do their presentations. We'd critique them a little bit, give them some tips. And people would be like, oh, that's way too long to do, or that's not long enough to do indicative sizing. You've only given us, vCPUs, VRAM, storage, and some very basic requirements. It's just not long enough. So what I like to do is show them that, well, how about you give me the same in reverse? I'll share my screen on my laptop, right? You can give me the same lack of information and I'll show you the process I go through. And I would show them that I could get to, a pretty reasonable indicative solution in about 5 minutes. And it's just because I focused where I was trying to show customers what the solution might look like. I wasn't trying to boil the ocean. I was just trying to get an example that could be a building block for something else. And I feel like giving someone a ballpark of the number of nodes they need, especially back in the early HCI days, that was an important step in that meeting. It was, I don't know if I can replace this SAN. Like, what would it look like? If I can't answer that for 3 meetings, that's a problem. So just having enough skills to be able to say, hey, you're probably only going to need 6 nodes, right? You've got 12 ESX hosts at the moment with a SAN. You can drop it to 6. That could be a good outcome for you. Oh, actually, yeah, that's worth exploring. Cool. Let's continue the conversation. So, yeah.
That's a great approach, because you start by making assumptions. You don't even ask. how many nodes. You just say, let's assume we have.
Mm.
And then you can invalidate those assumptions later as you progress the design, right?
Exactly.
But it accelerates the conversation so that you actually uncover the real bottlenecks in the system instead of creating an artificial bottleneck around how big is this? Oh, somebody go look it up. Let's all sit here and wait while Joe goes and looks up that number. Moving on.
Yeah,
Bias
what it
towards
might look
action,
like,
right?
and down the track we can adjust it. And I would show people. I made this, back in the early Nutanix days. I made up a little spreadsheet, and it just had a whole bunch of inputs in it. And I would just do the sizing live in front of the customer. And I would say, hey, if I assume this is what it might look like. If I change that assumption, it might look like that. So your range is from X, to Y. Your solution will be somewhere in the middle. And they go, oh, okay, cool. Even if it's at the most expensive end, that sounds viable. Or you know what, we really need to validate that assumption because that's outside our budget if that's not the case. Cool, let's go and quickly validate that and start working forward.
Amazon calls that a two-way door, and I always loved that, right? One-way door is you can't walk back through the other way and undo the decision. But so many of the delays in getting work accomplished and delivering customer value are due to us treating situations that are actually two-way doors, easy to change, easy to go back on. We treat them like they're one-way doors, and we sit and wait until we can decide around that, and then we move on to the next one, and it's a one-way door again. No, most of them are two-way doors. Just decide, assume, move on, get work done, deliver value to the customer, and then iterate. It's far more productive. Absolutely.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think in most cases, like you make an assumption, as long as there's not a massive risk associated with it, it's okay.
Right.
Like, let's continue making progress. To your point earlier, which is let's get the customer some progress, and then let's sell at that point another engagement, circle back and expand it and do things more comprehensively.
I always loved, there's an example in, I think it was the Phoenix Project, or it might have been the DevOps Handbook, where they were talking about, mailing something, right? You need to send 10 letters, newsletters out. And, let's assume that it takes, 10 seconds to fold and another 10 seconds to insert the folded letter and another 10 seconds to lick the envelope and then another 10 seconds to mark the address and put the stamp on. It's 40 seconds to complete the process for each letter. And a lot of us naturally say, well, I'm more efficient if I do all the folding at once and then all the insertion at once and then all of the licking and sticking. The problem is you're not delivering any value until an hour down the line. After all those little 40 seconds have added up, the first letter doesn't come out until all the letters are done. Whereas you could have the first one out in 40 seconds if you just did each step and delivered it. And for letters, that's not as important because we're stuck waiting on the U.S. Postal Service or the post, and that takes days, right? But the example really resonated with me that we keep customers waiting while we work on things for other customers when we could be delivering their value immediately. And I think that's one of my key takeaways always, and it's also part of the getting things done, GTD methodology. Identify the things in your inbox that'll take you less than 5 minutes to complete. Just get them done. Don't even put them in a queue. Don't prioritize them. Don't wait. If it's going to take you 5 minutes or less, just get it done right now. And that has always stuck with me that if it's going, so we need to get good at that assessment because it becomes a problem if you think something's going to take you 5 minutes and it takes 3 hours, then you get bogged down. But I think too often really smart architects aren't bogged down by how much they know or having a gap in their knowledge. They're not capable of organizing their work. And so they struggle to deliver value to the customer because they're spending too much time in their own heads.
Yeah. Absolutely. I mean, certainly for me, I tried to do that for years. Is just 5-minute tasks. Let's get them done. And as much as possible, I try and do that to this day. I think it's so important. Like one of my team gives me a call and wants a quick chat. Yeah, let's do it right now. Like I've got 10 minutes. Let's just do it right now. And
Yeah.
that way, I unblock that person potentially. Obviously, I don't want people sitting there spinning their wheels. So I try and help people out where I can. And same with me. I try and just get things off my plate as quick as I can, send a quick email. If I'm in the car, quickly have a phone call, get it done.
Excellent. Well, I mean, we've talked through my big loves in my career and all the amazing people I've worked with. I did spend a year and a half at Amazon, and I took, as you say, there's always opportunities to learn new things. And it was an incredible experience with good people. And in the end, this ended up being a lot about our work arrangement. I'm used to working remote now. I've worked remote as a VMware employee pretty much the whole time because I started in service delivery, right? So I was with customers every week. And then, I never moved to Palo Alto when I took a corporate job there. And Amazon is making the decision to pull everybody in to the office. And I wholeheartedly support the idea behind that we collaborate better, we invent better when we're together, right? I think it's going to be an interesting conversation, as far as the way we work as an industry. It'll be an interesting conversation because I think you can do both. You can be a remote team that gets together in the office every quarter. Once a quarter, and everybody comes into one office. I don't see value in everybody going into different offices, so 2 team members go into the LA office and 2 go into the San Francisco, 2 go into the Atlanta office, 1 goes into the New York office. I don't see value in that. All they're doing is commuting back and forth between their homes every day, and they're not all together, right? So moving from the mentality that we had before of team offsites once a year, we need team on-sites at least 3 or 4 times a year now. And I think remote work should be here to stay.
I agree. And that's how I run my company as well is, we're remote. We come together when it's required and, it's not so formal yet where it's still a small company. But I think like you say, do an on-site every quarter or something like that. Or when there's a project, we'll come and collaborate on a project together. But remote is actually quite important, I think, for what we're offering, which is, we can follow the sun. We can provide implementation services out of hours at the same rate as in hours because we've got someone overseas or we've got someone in a different region. So I think it's quite important. And I think it's also good because our customers are not all in one spot. So I'm based in Melbourne. If I got all my team just to move to Melbourne, we'd just be on a plane back to where they probably currently are. So it doesn't make sense to me to force them to go into an office to sit somewhere potentially by themselves to just remotely communicate anyway. So I prefer to make sure people have a great work environment, at their home office and make sure they have, good monitor, good chair, good audio equipment, everything they need to do their job efficiently. In fact, one of the things I'm doing is I bought a light board so I can do light board studio videos, things like that. It's really cool for customer presentations. So that's one thing I want to make sure every one of my principal architects has so that they can do those regardless of where they are in the world. Because I think if someone needs a VCDX type skill set, they usually need it pretty promptly. So rather than us get on a plane to do a design workshop, we can deliver that remotely on a light board that feels like it's in person, can be recorded, can be very interactive, can work for people who are remote and who are in the office just as well. So I feel like
and it's not a digital facsimile of the real thing. You've got a dry erase pen in your hand and you're drawing on the surface, and you can very rapidly put together the customer solution. And there is something to be said for the speed of being able to doodle just without any other technology between you and the customer. For sure.
Absolutely. So I really enjoy doing those, and I think the light board's a great investment. It's not cheap, but it's a pretty cool device. And for people like us, I think it's worth having.
Absolutely. Yeah, and to Amazon's credit, I don't think they're being disingenuous. I really don't think it's their end goal to have people coming into 5 different offices. I think it's their end goal that each team work out of one office. So people like me, who that didn't work for, will leave the company, and new people who are in Seattle or in a location will join the team. And I think that's a perfectly reasonable expectation of Amazon. It just wasn't compatible with my plans going forward. I just moved to the Redwoods 3 years ago, so I don't plan on moving away anytime soon. My wife and I building our dream home out here in Sonoma County.
Yeah, fantastic. Well, that's why remote work is important, and that's why you're lucky to have the skills that you do, because you can literally do
absolutely
anywhere. So that's
I'm grateful for it every day, for sure.
Yeah, and to your point earlier, right at the start of the podcast, VCDX was one of the top things you did in your career, and I think for me it's the same. It holds true, and it's not really the certification necessarily; it's just the skills and experience that led to that. And the certification might have been the original driver, but I had no idea the value of VCDX until I'd gone through it, and I realized, wow, that was a good choice. Like, that wasn't too hard.
None of us had the idea of what VCDX was going to become, right? Nobody knew. And I think it's gone in 2 distinct directions that nobody anticipated. One, I think it's far more valuable than anybody thought it would be, simply because of the humans that have achieved the certification. It really has very little to do with a rubric or a process, right? It's the quality of the people. So you meet one person who's badged as a VCDX, then you meet another, and you go, wow, there's some consistency here with the caliber of professional that has earned this certification. So it's more valuable than anybody thought it would be. And it's also far more rare than I think anybody thought it would be. And that's actually a regret that I have as someone who was involved at the beginning. I wanted it to be hard, but I also wanted it to be achievable. I wanted it to be something that you could train someone into and elevate their soft skills and their design skills to be able to achieve that next level. And many folks, that has been exactly what's happened. But I thought we'd have thousands by now, not hundreds. And that's okay. It's just different, right? It wasn't what we expected.
Yeah, I mean, I'd love to see thousands. And I think, I certainly see the value in my team. There's 4 in my team. So I know that I don't need to babysit them. I don't need to manage them. I can sort of send them off on their own. And then when they need a peer review, they can come to me or someone else in the team and have that conversation. But it really means customers get a consistent outcome. And, when I look to hire people, which I'm looking to hire people, is I feel like that's a great baseline, because I know those people have a minimum level of skill. And I can put them into a project of enormous scale and complexity. And, they might not know everything. They might need to bring an SME in for whatever technology, but I know that they're going to lead that outcome successfully. So when I talk to customers, I can say, look, very confidently, anyone in my team can handle the lead role. They may well leverage other skills in the team. But it's a great baseline. And I certainly am hoping that I can hire a few double VCAPs and bring them up to VCDX and grow the end-to-end team with people we've actually built as well. So that'll be a great challenge over the next couple of years. And obviously also, like you and I have spoken off air, we'd love to help build the VCDX program more and, grow it. And obviously we're trying to champion it today on this podcast and some of the earlier episodes. And hopefully we can get to thousands.
Absolutely. You hear that, Carl? We're coming for you.
Carl's well aware.
Good
I did a
stuff.
podcast with him, and I said to him, "I'm going
I
to
know
grow
you
that
did.
program whether he likes it or not." So,
Right. I think he'll appreciate it.
no, he does. Carl's a great guy, so it's good to have someone
Yeah,
like that leading the program. To
absolutely.
that end, so you mentioned AWS. So with AWS and VMware, obviously there's VMC on AWS, and then there's the equivalent
Yeah.
offering Azure VMware solution, Google Cloud, VMware Engine, and Oracle Cloud, and all these that are effectively deploying SDDCs in an automated manner, similar to hands-on labs, on the hyperscalers. What's your opinion and experience on these solutions?
I think it's brilliant. It's a lasting legacy of Pat Gelsinger and his pivot strategy, where VMware, we had put out into the market our own public cloud solution, thinking that we would be a public cloud provider. And I think VMware missed where the customer was going, right? VMware skated to where the puck was at that time, instead of to where the puck was going. The Gretzky analogy, right? And so I think Pat was quick to acknowledge that mistake and negotiated a brilliant solution, right? All right, we don't need to own the hardware. And customers have shown that they want to run their other layers of cloud with Azure, AWS, Google Cloud, Oracle, right? Their platform as a service, their application as a service type solutions, the rest of their cloud native stuff. Um, VMware is still a great solution to run all of your containers, to run all of the rest of your virtualized workloads, right? All the Tanzu stuff. So how do we, as VMware, how does VMware uh, take advantage and provide best of both worlds to mutual customers, right? Customers who want to take advantage of these new clouds, but still has a strong need to continue running their virtualized workloads. And, I think the Tanzu play actually is a clean way to make a case that VMware is the best place to run containerized solutions as well. So it's a strong app modernization play for containerized workloads, right? VMware doesn't have a like Lambda like solution, right? A serverless, because VMware depends on living on a server somewhere, right? And there is like the new Flex uh, cloud solution where you can just not even pay attention to ESX capacity, just run VMs. So that's good. I think what that acknowledges is that not every customer is the same, and the reason it was a good pivot is because it listened to what customers wanted to do, right? So as someone now who has worked for many years, and really I do have a very VMware centric, I still say we when I should be saying they, perspective on the world, I'm, a year and a half away from my time where I was a VMwarean, but I still think very much like one. And we should acknowledge today is a very significant day for our friends at VMware. So our thoughts are with everyone as all of those changes occur with the acquisition, and I hope and wish everyone the best for sure.
Absolutely.
Exciting times for many, but also some folks will be getting news that is unfortunate. So we definitely wish everyone the best there. But I would say the reason VMware is still relevant and a going concern is because they recognize the opportunity for co-opetition, right? They knew that they have a strong beachhead in the enterprise, and they are opening up new markets for Google, for AWS, right? By providing access to VMware customers, right? So there is a benefit that VMware is bringing to the table, and that was the brilliance of that play.
I agree. It's a fantastic strategy, and it's actually in the best interest of the customer as well, while also, I think, being in the best interest of VMware. So it's a win-win. Like, it's actually best for everyone.
I think, as one now who spent 1.5 years at AWS, it is interesting how much they see the world through an AWS lens, right? They're only now starting to use multi-cloud as a terminology, because what other cloud is there than AWS, right? And, there is one mode of thinking that AWS's goal would be to provide the only cloud that their customers need. That's a noble goal, right? I think they're acknowledging, just like VMware did, is that our customers are going to put their money where their business focus is. So, it's really easy to tell where the gaps are in your business. Where are customers buying your competition?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think the statement made, Keith Townsend actually made a statement recently that he declared hybrid had won, and Keith's obviously, a great presenter. I like watching his stuff. So he's like, hybrid has won. He went on a victory lap. It was very entertaining, and he's right. But I think that's the key is hybrid is really the dominant topology. So if you choose one of the hyperscalers and you want to deploy natively, great. Like, some of your workloads are going to go there. They're going to work well. They're going to be fantastic. Your net new stuff might go there really well, but you've got this huge legacy, which is just difficult to transform, and you might simply not be able to. So having that hybrid capability, VMware on a hyperscaler, sitting right beside native workloads in that same environment, it's a win-win. So I love it, actually.
But Josh, doesn't this sound familiar? It's like mainframe all over again, which, is like Unix all over again, Unix to Linux. We go through cycles, right? So the last great transformation, when we virtualized a ton of this stuff, and VMware was the disruptor, right? And now VMware, in many cases, is the legacy, and I think, that's where, like in the old days, P2V, like the plate spin product, if you remember those,
I do,
right? Just sucks up the whole image, Acronis, Norton Ghost, sucks up the whole image and just plop it onto a VM. It's really the same thing that a lot of, VMC on AWS, you're just migrating virtual machines, but it's ESX on somebody else's bare metal, right? So you don't have to think about what are the architectural differences between a VM in EC2 versus a VM, running on ESX. Why do we go through that hoop? Why is that important? Well, because customers have years and years of technical debt and also accrued knowledge and speed, working within the VMware ecosystem. So I thought, there's nothing wrong with this, wholesale drop an entire, virtual real data center, fully configured vSphere deployment into the hyperscaler clouds. It works because operationally customers get it. And it fits.
Yeah, it fits. And it's to your point earlier about delivering an outcome quickly to that scope of works when you're in OSO. It's getting an outcome, getting it quickly, and then from there you can go, cool. Would you like to do a transformation project? Great. We're in a great place where we can start that journey. Or no, you don't want to. You actually want to bring stuff back from native onto VMware because it's doing the job. Either way, you're in a great spot to do it.
So here's the thing where the conversation gets interesting, right? And I'll play a little devil's advocate here. So this strategy, while it makes a lot of sense, is also consistent with mistakes that VMware made previously, right? Because what's the drawback of VMC on AWS, for example? you can't just get a little piece.
Mm.
You end up having to buy a massive virtual infrastructure. And that is what gave EC2 as a competitive example, just straight as a VM,
Yeah.
an opportunity, right? Because you didn't have to buy any of the infrastructure. You could just buy that little slice of capacity. And I don't think VMware has figured out the answer to that question. They've kind of kicked the can further down the road.
A little bit.
I mean, I think that Flex product, right, is intended to be that because it's a VMware VM, but you're just buying it based on that. But now you have operational challenges.
Yeah.
It doesn't integrate with any of the APIs and approaches, hard to migrate in and out. It's not standard, right?
Kind of one
It's
of
an
those
ESX, but it's not.
features that kind of does some stuff, but it's not quite where we want it to be. But
right.
I think to your point, right, there's, I mean, in conversations, even when I was at Nutanix and now at End to End, it's like a couple hundred VMs, right, to justify one of these hyperscaler hypervisor solutions. And there's tons of customers that can justify that. And, for the customers that are smaller than that, okay, maybe it's more cost effective just to try and go cloud native, or maybe it's more cost effective just to stay on-prem.
Right.
But there's so many variables that, one customer, I'm like, yeah, you should definitely stay on-prem. Like cost-wise, you're in far better off. But then the next conversation is, oh my God, you're far better off going all in with AVS or something like that, because different horses, different courses. So,
well, and even within the same customer, you've got one set of business requirements and assumptions, and then a new project comes.
Yeah.
And you realize, oh my gosh, the scale at which this needs to be implemented is going to completely change your calculus, right? All of a sudden, VMC on AWS or AVS makes a lot more sense because you need that much more capacity. And how long is it going to take your team to provision that versus how quickly could you get it from the hyperscaler?
Yeah, and I think
some of these more. Oh, go ahead.
Yeah, I was going to say time to value is really underrated. Yeah. It was something I heard a lot of sort of in the early 2010s, and I think HCI maybe kicked that off a little bit. But
it did.
What I looked at was, just recently, at the start of this year, there was this quite a large customer, and they were doing hardware refreshes because they were going end of life, end of warranty for hardware. Okay, cool. That's a very important thing to address. But they were just stuck in a cycle of doing, like for like refreshes. They never got to a point where they actually stopped and went, is there a better way we can do it? And those teams were full of talented people, but they're just flat out doing busy work, I call it. And busy work doesn't mean it's bad. It just means you're busy doing work you probably could avoid. And they were trying to stand up new environments for test labs and new projects and all this kind of stuff. And it just took so long to even get the ball rolling that, yes, I'm sure that the cost hardware to hardware of on-prem versus, AVS, GCV, whatever, I'm sure there'd be a big discrepancy, right? No doubt. But total cost of ownership, they would actually get far better outcomes if they just went all in and they could just bring all their VMs in. Okay, you're end of life with that hardware. Great. Let's get an express route happening. Let's make sure connectivity's set up, networking's set up. Boom. All new projects are going into AVS or GCV or wherever. And their time to value would have been incredible. I'm sure the CEO would have got a promotion and a pay rise because he could get things done so quickly had they gone down that route. So I think we're going to see a lot of that because it's just the cost actually that I notice people don't factor in is their staff because they're already there.
Well, and they don't, DevOps principles suggest 20% for the paying down technical debt, right? They never pay it down. So then you end up firefighting all the time. Instead of actually, you end up with unplanned work dominating. Instead of actually getting planned work. I've had this project sitting at my inbox for 2 weeks. Well, what that means is there's some other project 2 workstations back that has also been waiting 2 weeks and nothing is moving through the system because we're all firefighting, right? Yep. If we don't set aside that 20% for process improvement, for turning local learning into global knowledge, right? Those practices need to be part of our culture. If we're not doing it, we will end up paying the price. Mm-hmm. And to your point, you think you're saving dollars, but you're actually losing it in opportunity costs, right? Because you're not accomplishing the goals of the business.
Absolutely. Opportunity cost is something that's not well understood in IT, and it's certainly not well understood in the financial markets either. So I think there's some learnings to be had both ways.
Right. I mean, you make decisions, and there are repercussions of those decisions every time, for sure.
Yeah, absolutely. That's an architect's life, isn't it? Talking about the implications of a decision. So
right. Right next to accountants, in terms of most misunderstood value added to the organization.
Yeah, absolutely.
Because all accountants want to talk about is risk, and all architects want to talk about is, assessment and, opportunities. And it's misunderstood because, and it's interesting, even with DevOps, what do you think the role of a modern architect is within a healthy DevOps organization? You'll get 20 answers, 20 different answers to that question. It's interesting.
Yeah, I think that's why it's important to define what's trying to be achieved at the start of a project.
Yeah.
If we don't define a certain success criteria, which is roughly measurable, then everyone's conflicting throughout the project, whichever phase you're at. And then, like you say, you get tech debt at the end because people go, oh, well, that wasn't a requirement. We can just push that one down and, we'll do the like-for-like refresh now, but the next time we won't. Oh, but yeah, it's the next time's coming. We're still too busy. We're still troubleshooting the like-for-like from the previous project. And it just, you don't get out of that vicious circle. So like you say, prioritizing time to address these issues is incredibly important to avoid repeating our mistakes.
Absolutely.
I think that's going to be a clip. I'm going to have to chop that one out for a dedicated clip. That's some gold there from Andrew.
That was good stuff, man. For sure.
That was very cool. Well, I think
I just have loved reconnecting with you and catching up, for sure. It's been too long, my friend.
It definitely has. And I appreciate your time. And I know we've got some little secret stuff going to be planned for another podcast in the near future.
Sure.
But this one's been fantastic. I think everyone will enjoy it.
Anything else you wanted to cover?
I think we nailed it. I think we'll let the audience decide with the like and subscribe buttons, but we'll see. We'll see how we go.
Okay.
Well,
it was awesome.
Appreciate your time.
I think we're going to we'll certainly be in touch. We've got lots to talk about. So
we absolutely do. No, it's a pleasure to have such talented people on, and you're no different. So thank you very much.
Thanks for your time, Josh. It was good to spend the afternoon with you.
Cheers.
Take care.